you see the end result, but you don't see the journey that it's taken them to get there, right? And that journey is the thing that doesn't necessarily make the headline. It's not the thing that is that clickbait title that people click on. And sometimes actually that individual doesn't understand what their experience is or how their life has compounded them into that moment to allow them to do so well, right? Even they don't know that, because we're not necessarily taught to be introspective, to unpick, okay, why is it that I'm good at this thing? Why is it that I've been able to do this? Sometimes people just take that for granted.
Julian, it is an absolute privilege to have you on the platform. You are the founder of Ultra Education and you are a leading entrepreneur. You spoke at Richard Branson's Disrupting for Good conference, and you're listed on things such as Forbes. You've been mentioned there. You've been mentioned in so many other platforms such as NatWest as well. So thank you so much for coming onto the platform.
Thank you for having me, Micah. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So according to Forbes, you started your first business at the age of 16. What sparked your entrepreneurial drive?
So I remember when I was in my teens, one of the most important things for a young person is to look good, right? Is to have the latest fashion. The problem that I had at the time, and my friends and I had, was that when we were looking at the outfits that the stars were wearing on TV and stuff, we couldn't access it and we couldn't afford it. So my girlfriend at the time, who had just qualified from the London College of Fashion, we were watching a TLC video, and Left Eye was wearing this spray painted dungaree. It looked so cool. And I asked her, not Left Eye, my girlfriend at the time, could you make that? And she said, yeah, I could make it. I could, with some fabric and some spray paint, might cost about £20 in materials. And I thought, hold on, if you can make that for £20, I could sell it for well over 100. And so that was the genesis of a fashion company that she led on with her design skills and her fashion knowledge. And she taught my friends and I from the local estate to sew, make clothes, pattern cut, choose fabrics. So we would come up with all these different clothing styles, t-shirts, there were things called click suits, hats, and then we would go out into the festivals, they were called all days at the time, in Finsbury Park, Brockwell Park, Hackney, Wembley, and we would just sell the stuff that we made. And so for me, what that did was it demonstrated to me that I could discover the solution to a problem that not only I felt, but other people, right? So, in that example, young people want to look cool, but they can't afford the clothing necessarily, right? But we can make the clothes and they're unique, they're super cool, but there's also a commercial value to it. And we could exchange that for, that value was exchanged for real cash with a real product that people could enjoy. So for me, that kind of closes the loop on the entrepreneurial journey, which is discovering a problem, coming up with a solution and exchanging it for value, and then repeating that cycle. And so that was the thing that really sparked my curiosity around entrepreneurship, because I thought, if I could do it for that, could I do it for other things?
So just to clarify, so your first business was a clothing brand.
Mm-hmm.
So how successful was your first business, just out of interest?
Yeah, so I always say it kept us out of trouble for a few summers. So, we sold hundreds of pieces. Hundreds and hundreds of pieces. We dressed some of the stars at the time. So, General Levy, when he won his first award, was wearing one of the suits that we made for him.
Wow. And
he was one of our regular customers. Big shout out to General Levy. And we supplied lots of shops in the West London area. There were lots and lots of young people at the time. So you're talking like the late 90s who were wearing our clothing.
Thank you. And even following on from that, I was watching your YouTube video on your, on the different entrepreneurs that you've done case studies of. And I was just really interested about knowing who are your entrepreneurial role models and why.
So I have a number of role models, and I'll explain why. But two which kind of stand out for me would be kind of 50 Cent and Jay-Z. So Jay-Z, because he was the first rapper to identify as a businessman, right? So he would say, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman, meaning he's just not a businessman himself. He is an entire business. The brand Jay-Z is an entire business, right? And that, you know, in a very kind of slick way of putting it through lyrics, everyone knew what he meant, meaning that, okay, Jay-Z, you're not just a businessman, you're an entire business. The brand Jay-Z is an entire business. And so that, for people in the hip-hop culture, and I'm sure the music culture, was a paradigm shift in the way that we understood the vehicle of music, and more broadly the vehicle of culture, to impact business. Jay-Z did that very successfully. He wasn't the first one to do it, but because he identified very firmly as an entrepreneur, that for me was quite inspirational, because it said that essentially you can pivot almost anything that you're good at into business and into entrepreneurship, right? And business and entrepreneurship is the natural point of growth for almost anything, particularly any creative endeavor. At some point, for you to be able to sustain that creative endeavor, you need to get paid for it, right? And you can get paid for it by exchanging your time, or you can get paid for it by creating a business, a brand that goes further than you as an individual, and Jay-Z did that really well. 50 Cent, on the other hand, was inspirational to me simply because of his come up. It was very aggressive, it was very rough. He had almost every disadvantage that you can imagine, right? But he had this thing we were talking about earlier on. He had this, you know, the X factor. He had this drive and this obvious unique quality that enabled him to navigate the industry, the streets, all of the adversity, and he had this self-belief that I think everyone just admired. And he was just like non-stop creating, doing, challenging, rising. And that for me was just really inspirational, you know, just being someone who was a fan of his music, but then seeing him rise so quickly in the way that he did, in a very different way to Jay-Z, and be able to kind of understand that when he was coming off the boil as a music artist, he would then pivot into film. You know, he wasn't like the old guy rapping. Even though he still raps in a sense, he realized, actually, no, for me to remain relevant, I'm a creative and I can express that in different ways, right? So for me, those were two really good examples of, people that I looked up to and modeled, because, you know, I grew up, you know, since I was a child with hip hop. So hip hop's been a very important part of, you know, my kind of how I represent myself culturally, right? And hip hop, one of the pillars of hip hop is street entrepreneurship. It's just one of the things that's been ingrained in hip hop and music culture is business, right? Sometimes for worse, sometimes for better. But for me, as a student of the game, as it were, it's very interesting for me to dissect those individuals, because they have made themselves accessible and they promote what they do. I don't know what, you know, the guy who set up a company turning over hundreds of millions of pounds in some other industry, right? I don't know his story. It could be equally as inspirational, but I don't know his story. He hasn't put his story out there, and not everyone needs to, but there have been a lot of individuals like 50, like Jay, and lots of others who have put their stories out there, so you can access it and you can use it as a way to model what you do. Not entirely, and I think the thing with role models is that I think it's dangerous to say somebody is my role model, because it suggests that you are modeling your entire basis on another person, which is flawed by design. You can't do that. So what I've done instead is I've I've borrowed aspects of someone's model to create a model for me that I think works for my context.
Thank you for that. And I'd also like to ask you, you started a business called Ultra Education, and that provides, entrepreneurship and like financial advice to children and young people. What inspired you to start that venture?
So when I was on my own entrepreneurial journey, I had a couple of experiences which really compelled me to start Ultra. One of them was my daughter, who is 17 now, 17 going on 27. When I remember being in the Sainsbury's with her, and I was carrying her in my arms, and there was a guy stacking the shelves, and she said, "Daddy, what's he doing?" She's like 7 at the time, 6, 7. I said, "Oh, he's stacking the shelves." She said, "Why is he doing that?" I said, because that's his job." And she said, "No, Daddy, a job is when you're at the computer, you're writing books, you're talking to people on interviews and stuff like that." And she was describing me. So she was describing an entrepreneur. In her mind, an entrepreneur is what work is. And she couldn't understand why this guy was doing this, right? And I thought, that's interesting. So my daughter's first understanding of work is entrepreneurship, is me. And so, as children do, they replay what they see through play. And there was a time when we were having like kind of family barbecue, and she came out as a little girl with her cousins, and she was saying, "Right, everyone, we've made stuff for you to buy, and if you don't have any money, we've made you credit cards too," right? And everyone looked at me like, they didn't say it, but they were looking at me like, "What have you been teaching this poor child? All this capitalism. She should be playing with dolls and, pink stuff." And I hadn't taught her a thing. It's like she just absorbed it as via osmosis what I was doing. And, we realized at the time that a child can learn, 5 or 6 different languages, be adept at musical instrument and sports at a young age. Why not entrepreneurship? And I thought, if my daughter can learn this stuff by accident, what if it was taught deliberately? And so, we started to kind of put together a curriculum because there wasn't one out there. And I thought, what would happen if you taught entrepreneurship to kids? Because up until that point, I'd run a number of businesses and I'd coached and consulted entrepreneurs. And one of the challenges that I came across each time with grown-up entrepreneurs is that there's an internal dialogue which adults, entrepreneurs or not, will have built up over life, which often will disable them. It's that internal dialogue that says, "I'm not good enough. Why me? I'm afraid. Who's going to buy my stuff? Why should I charge so much? No one's going to believe in me. I'm going to fail." There's this internal dialogue running, right? And it's very difficult to break that. A 7-year-old doesn't have that internal dialogue, right? If you say to a 7-year-old, "You can fly," they'll be like, "When?" They're not going to say, "Of course I can't fly." They almost believe anything you tell them, right? So if you say to them, "You could be an entrepreneur," they'll be like, "Okay, let's start." And so we, created a model and a curriculum that through play and activities and fun would get kids coming up with, products and services and things. What we discovered actually was that at that time, so we're talking 2014, 2015, kids already knew about business because the content that they were digesting, mainly on YouTube at the time, had creators who themselves were considered entrepreneurs, right? So you would see little girls watching videos with other girls making slime, for example, right? So now they want to make slime and then they want to sell it. Or it could be, boys gaming, right? And they understand that through gaming, they can get views, they can get money. So now they want to do that. And all other types of, kind of products and things that, or even just content itself, right? Being the new media. So we realized the kids already had an appetite for that. The problem was they didn't have a mechanism to handhold them through the process of, I've got an idea to make slime, and to turn it into my own business. But what are the steps? What do I actually need to do to get there? And some of them would work it out, but most of them wouldn't. And that's where we found our sweet spot, is in engaging kids in the things that they already wanted to do. Or it could just be that they had a hobby, and we could peel back the layer and say, do you realize you could turn that hobby into a business? And here's some examples, right? And so that was that started to build the foundation of our work.
I think that's incredible, because one thing that I was reading from your LinkedIn post is that you shared lessons that you would share with your children as you turn 50. And one of them was that your children are more influenced by you than you think. And when you go back to that story, I just find that just so incredible how your daughter sees entrepreneurship as work, which is really powerful, actually. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I was really interested in about you is, in an interview, you actually said that children see success, but they don't understand what it takes. What was the inspiration behind that statement, and how does it relate to business?
So, one of the problems that we have with new media is that young people see the celebrities and people that they look up to as blowing up overnight, right? And even in kind of my generation, there's this idea of the overnight success. But nowadays, we know that the overnight success took 10 years, right? And so when you've got these social media influencers or whomever they might be kind of blowing up overnight, kids think that that is the norm, that actually they can do the same thing too, right? They can blow up overnight. What they don't do is actually look into that. And you know, some of these social media influencers, let's take Charli D'Amelio, for example, who blew up on TikTok as a dancer. I mean, that was an accident. That was not engineered. She didn't mean to do that, right? But she just she kind of caught lightning in a bottle, right? And in a way that you can't necessarily replicate. So you wouldn't regard it as a business, but you know, if you know what I mean, right? If you look at someone like, I don't know, let's take Jake Paul and KSI, who created the Prime drink, yeah? The Prime drink looks like it blew up overnight, but they've been grinding their brands out for the last 10, 15 years. And so that 10, 15 year grind was what they could use to springboard Prime, right? So what I'm saying is, this isn't just for kids, but kids kind of see an amplification of this. When you see someone blow up on social media, YouTube, whatever it might be, with their products or whatever it might be, you see the end result, but you don't see the journey that it's taken them to get there, right? And that journey is the thing that doesn't necessarily make the headline. It's not the thing that is that clickbait title that people click on. And sometimes actually that individual doesn't understand what their experience is or how their life has compounded them into that moment to allow them to do so well, right? Even they don't know that, because we're not necessarily taught to be introspective, to unpick, okay, why is it that I'm good at this thing? Why is it that I've been able to do this? Sometimes people just take that for granted. And so when young people see success, the media makes it look easy, because the media is packaging the end result, right? But what the media doesn't do, and perhaps doesn't have time to do, because they've only got 60 seconds on a short, right, is to unpack the history of that young person and all of their influences, young person, adult, doesn't matter, to inform as to why they've now been successful, right? So I'll give another example. So my son, he's he's an actor. He's 14 now. He's been acting for some years now. And when he first started, we just wanted to put him in some modelling. What mum doesn't want to put their kid in modelling, right? It's all cute and everything. And then the agent said, "Oh, would you consider Malachi for like an acting gig or whatever?" And I thought to myself, my son hasn't got a talented bone in his body. What do you mean, right? And he went up for a part in a West End musical. It was Get Up, Stand Up, as young Bob Marley, and he got the part, right? Now, one of the things that I then realised was that during the pandemic, my son and I did a whole series of YouTube videos together, right? It was like a father-son thing where we would talk about, we were essentially creating content to help other young people understand business concepts. And it was called Ask Ultra. And we must have done, I don't know, 30, 40 videos. Him and I sitting down, recording, him learning scripts and all the rest of it. And someone said to me, oh, it's no surprise that Malachi is doing really well at acting because he did that with you. And I was like, of course. He's comfortable in front of a camera and lights, and he's studying a script, and he knows, the etiquette around filming and all the rest of it. And I thought, of course, that's why, right? That's the thing that no one really saw. Not everyone, even I didn't connect it, right? But that was the thing that prepped him. In retrospect, it's clear that he does have a natural talent for it. It is clear he has a natural talent for it. But that experience, we know, gave him, whether it was just the confidence to actually be in front of lights, camera, and not be fazed by it, because he just wasn't fazed by it. And so I think that what we try and do in our programs, if a young person says, right, I want to write a book, I want to be a podcaster, whatever it is, part of our job is to unpack what that journey looks like for them for real, right? And them not just thinking, okay, they're going to do one series of podcasts and they're going to blow up, they're going to be the next Micah, right? Because you've got to put in that graft, that hard work. And that's why I was asking you earlier, do you know what your X factor is? Because not everyone knows, or because it's that X factor that will often be the determining success metric for you to rise above all of the other people that are doing the same kind of thing. And so with young people, we look for and try and identify in that young person qualities that they're not necessarily seeing themselves, because we know that those are the qualities that they can use to become head and shoulders above everyone else, right? Everyone's got that quality. Everyone has an X factor, but most people don't know what it is. And even if they knew what it was, they don't know how to leverage it, right? How to take it out of the box and actually use it as a tool for whatever it is that they're trying to do. And entrepreneurship is just the perfect vehicle to exercise someone's X factor. And if we can do that with people whilst they're younger, then for me, their life chances just increase exponentially.
I think what you're saying there is so powerful, because even just reflecting on my podcasting journey, it took me 5 years to get here. So I started it in 2020 in the pandemic, and then it only blew up in the last year. So I got 600,000 views in the space of a year. So it takes time.
It does take time. Wow, congratulations. Very inspirational.
And even following on from that, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about children when it comes to business?
The biggest misconception is that they're not good at it and they're not interested in it. Those are the two biggest misconceptions, wow. Right? So when we first started it, people were like, oh, just leave the kids alone, let them play, right? Getting them involved in all this grown-up stuff. And actually, we were letting them play. It was the way in which we were teaching entrepreneurship. It wasn't like, you're going to learn how to do a business today and I'm going to whip you into shape. It wasn't that. Our whole approach, and I would do this live on the spot with people. I remember I was in a workshop and I said that anything could become a business, right? Any hobby could become a business. So then one of the parents in the room said, but all my son likes to do is to go to this cinema. How can you turn that into a business, right? And I said, we had a screen up and I went into YouTube and I typed in film critic, and it popped up with all of the YouTubers who review films. And I said, that's how, right? If your son loves watching movies, all he then needs to do is review them. People will watch it. Every time he watches the movie, he reviews them. Now he's a content creator. And who knows, right? Who knows where that can go, right? And so once kids see that and they see, oh, wow, there's a platform that I'm familiar with, YouTube, and there are other people doing it. Now, if I see it, now I can see it, I can believe that it's possible. And I know how to upload a video. I've got a phone, I can do it myself, right? So what we found is that because of the new platforms that we've got, essentially because of technology, it means that business is accessible to kids. So one of the things that people, think kids can't set up a business because it's not accessible to them. So let's say a kid wants to set up a t-shirt business, right? 20 years ago, for that to be the case, you'd have to buy 1,000 t-shirts, find somewhere to store them, find somewhere to print them, find somewhere to distribute them, right? But we know today, you want to set up a t-shirt business, there are a number of platforms out there where you can just do print on demand, it's drop shipped, you just create the designs, and you can promote it for free on the gram, and you're out there. You could do it in a day. This is all very new stuff. You couldn't do that before. And then there were completely new business models that just did not exist before, like podcasting, like content creation. That stuff just wasn't there, like being a social media manager, being a copywriter for digital. It just didn't exist before, right? So for us, it's saying, okay, technology has made starting a business accessible. It's made exercising and running a business easier. The barriers to entry have now dropped almost completely, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is that kids like making money. Let me just make it as obvious as I can make it, right? They like making money. They just do. And it's not that they like making money because they're evil capitalists. No. Money is a form of exchange, right? And they know that there's value in that exchange. They just know this. For kids who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, they also know that money could be a problem. They might hear their parents arguing about money. They might hear someone on the phone saying, I haven't got enough money for that. They may ask their mum for the PlayStation 6 or whenever it's coming out. Can't afford it. So they get the concept of money and why it's important. For them to now have an opportunity to make that, to create something of value where they can exchange it for money, that's empowering for them, right? And so even if you boil it all the way down to just making a little bit of extra pocket money or whatever it might be, being able to afford to buy their own presents for their friends or their family, it's not about the money, it's about what did they need to create to be able to, that was of enough value to exchange with those pounds and pence. That's the thing that is important. And so we've been able to do that. We've been able to show kids how they can take something that they love. And this is how we define an entrepreneur to a 10-year-old. It's someone who does what they love and they make money from it, right? We draw a distinction between business and entrepreneurship. And there are lots of memes out there which are around this. So a business person would buy a lemon for 10p, don't know how much lemons cost, right? Buy a lemon for 10p and sell it for 20p. An entrepreneur will take lemons and turn them into lemonade, right? Yeah. And then you can sell it for £1, right? And so there's a creative process in that. What can I do with a lemon, right? What can I do with a phone camera? We know entire businesses have been generated from a phone camera. What can I do with the design? I love drawing. I love creating designs. What can I do with the design? We know multi-million-pound businesses have started from a design, right? I like writing stories. What can you do with a story? Books, movies, theatre, TV. The list is endless, right? So all we do is connect those dots for that young person, right? And now, again, technology is further accelerating that. So we've got kids who have written books and have been really successful with their books. And one of the models for an author, someone who's got a story and publishes a book, is to turn that into a movie, right? But there are genuine cost barriers to turning your book into a movie. However, there are a bunch of AI platforms out there where you can create pretty impressive film, pretty impressive film. I mean, the latest Wu-Tang video was done entirely on AI. We're working with a lady called Diane Laidlaw, who's got a platform called Afrofuture, and she's won a ton of awards. She was very early in experimenting with AI filmmaking, and she's running a course for our young people in May to help them get their heads around these new platforms that can create ultra real films and moving images, right? And you can just So it's essentially, we are now being able to give them the power to turn their stories into visuals, right, that look real. And so, you know, these are step changes which are important. And because they're kids, they're not going to think, oh, AI is too complicated, I can't do it, right? They're just going to dive right in. They're going to be excited by it. It's a creative process. And so for us, that's really exciting. The ability to, you know, take that creativity that every child has and to use the platforms that we know exist now to leverage that creativity into something, into a piece of content, into a t-shirt, a podcast, you know, a service, whatever it might be, that they can that can hold some value, right? And that value will now be exchanged for something that they can hopefully put in their savings, and not just buy the latest Jordans with it.
Thank you so much for that. And even following on from that, in last year you spoke at Richard Branson's conference, Disrupting for Good. Incredible achievement. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
First question I'd like to ask is, how were you spotted by Virgin to actually speak and meet Richard Branson at Necker Island?
Yeah, great question. So the year before that, so 2 years ago, we were nominated, in a sense, for their inaugural Virgin Unite Award, which is their kind of charity arm. And so we, you know, went through the process. We were up against some great organizations. Thankfully, you know, we won that award, which was great. I didn't think we were going to win it, but we did, which was, you know, an amazing achievement. I felt really good about it. And that put us on their radar. And so then when they were planning that conference on Necker Island, my name came up again, and then I was invited over.
And what was it like meeting Richard Branson and spending time with him at Necker Island?
So Richard Branson is probably almost every entrepreneur's role model in some regard, right? Especially if you're from the UK. The trouble has always been that because he's just so extreme in his success, you kind of think, how can I model that? You know, he's an inspiration, but how can I role model that? It's been very difficult. Because I had the opportunity to meet him and, you know, loads of others on the trip, I took that opportunity just to be observant and just think, okay, you know, what the hell has this man been able to do? What does he drink, right? Is it like, you know, is it nectar from, you know, from the gods? What does he do that other people don't do, right? Let me try and spot it. And to be honest with you, it was all the things you wouldn't expect of a successful billionaire. When you say successful billionaire, you think arrogance, you think self-centeredness, you think, you know, it's all about them and all the rest of it. And that just wasn't the case with him. He's very humble. You can tell he doesn't want all the fuss of, you know, you've just got to be cool, right? Don't be around him like on a fanboy thing. Don't do that. Just be cool, right? And you could tell that he just wanted to experience the moment with the people that he was with. And, you know, he did a lot of stuff he just didn't have to do. When we arrived, you know, he met us on the red deck just by the beach. You know, he came and he greeted each one of us. And I just thought, you're a billionaire, you don't have to do that. You know, you don't have to come and, like, he was the welcoming party, right? When we left, he, you know, came and, you know, saw us off, and we, you know, had breakfast, lunch and dinner with him. He took us out on hikes, took us out on bike rides. He, you know, he was teaching people to swim. He was doing all sorts, right? And I guess what, you know, I took away from that experience in just observing him was that he paid a lot of attention to his well-being, right? He would get up, play tennis, you know, 5, 6 a.m. for a couple of hours. He'd hike on a regular basis, bike, you know, he ate really healthily. So all of the things that everyone talks about, but you kind of saw him really doing it, right? He paid a lot of attention to his health and his well-being. That was obvious. But then you also realize that someone who has everything, right? You've got your own island, you've got everything, right? He spends his time trying to use his influence to change things for the better. It's what he does. So you kind of think to yourself, well, if you've got all the things money can buy, that obviously means that that isn't enough. That's not what drives you, right? What's driving you is the fact that you can make change, you can do good, you can use your influence to shift and move the needle on issues that you care about, right? And he does it at a really big scale. But you kind of think to yourself that, at that conference, the overriding theme was that business is no longer just about profit. If you are in business and all you think about is profit, you are going to go out like the dinosaurs. Business and purpose are now one. And purpose must follow profit. Or even the other way around, profit must follow purpose. They are intertwined now. You cannot just profit from people, profit from the planet, profit from the community, profit from the resources. You can no longer do that. It's just not aligned with whether it's you take planetary good, you take it in terms of good for the country, good for communities, good for families. It just hasn't worked. One of the reasons why people don't like the idea of business is because business has been responsible for a lot of the things which have, caused the world and communities to suffer. It just has, because it's been done in a way which has been focused on profit alone, right? And greed alone. And it's not, it hasn't balanced that with purpose, people and planet, right? So that conference was really to bring business leaders around the world together to say, right, let's talk about this more. What can we do more? What more can we do with regards to ensuring that businesses have a firm handle on purpose within their organizations, and it's not just driven by profit.
And last question about Necker Island is, what were your best memories, aside from Richard Branson, what were your best memories while you were there?
My best memories whilst I was there was Necker Island kind of looks like paradise.
Wow.
Yeah. And just, like in terms of the nature, the views, the weather, and one of the staff took me around. I'm not sure if Branson knew this. He took me behind the scenes, right? And showed me how sustainable the island was. I mean, there's like 100 solar panels, 2 windmills, everything's electric. It was just all sustainable. And for me, looking at how the island operates, right, as a business model, for me, that was like an experience, because, you think, okay, Necker Island's Richard's home, but it's not just that. It's an entire business of itself, and it's run sustainably. There's, 20, 30 staff of the island, and an extended number of up to 50, 60, 70 or whatever. So you think to yourself, like, there's an entire business that's being run on this island. And, I got to see the inner workings of that, which for me was a real experience, because it kind of said that, again, as I was saying earlier on, you can make a business out of anything, right? He's taken an island and turned it into a business, which sustains the island itself and provides opportunities for the neighbouring islands, of which there are very little opportunities, because it's it's in the middle of the Caribbean Ocean. It's not great access to opportunities, right? But Necker Island creates opportunities for all of the other small neighbouring Caribbean islands. So for me, that was really amazing to see.
Thank you. And on the theme of disrupting for good, what is the most rewarding aspect of running Ultra Education?
Yeah, the most rewarding aspect of running Ultra Education for me, and I think for any of the staff, volunteers, people that have mentored our young people, is in seeing the transformation that happens with our young people. Seeing them shift the way that they think, seeing them becoming empowered, seeing them changing the trajectory of their lives. And we know that if those children become successful in their business, not only does it impact their lives, but it could impact generations. Many of them are taking that entrepreneurial mindset, they're taking it into politics, they're taking it into the environment, they're taking it into music, they're taking it into fashion, they're taking it into the arts. And so we can see that in reality, what we've done is, whenever we add another parent to the WhatsApp group, so we've got a WhatsApp group of hundreds of parents in it. Whenever we add someone in, someone also says, one of the other parents will say, "Welcome to the Ultra family," right? And the parents call themselves Ultra parents. We didn't come up with those terms, the parents did. I remember the day, it was I think it could have been in 2017, when a parent called themselves an Ultra parent, and they said to someone who came in, "Welcome to the Ultra family." And that was created entirely from the community that we had built, right? So we've created a safe space where parents know that we just want the best for their kids, right? And the answer to the question, why do we want the best for their kids? It's because I know that if for every one child that's successful, that one child could impact the lives of thousands of others, tens of thousands of others, maybe millions of others, right? So if we can just keep doing that, for me, I'm inspired by what the world could look like if there were more successful entrepreneurs at a younger age, because I have no idea what they're going to do in the future, but what I do know is that it's going to be impactful. What I do know is that it will bring change. What I do know is that they will go out and solve problems with new solutions, right? What I do know is that they are going to impact their communities, their families. They are going to inspire others. And for me, that ripple effect is it's what I get up for every morning, because I know that ultimately, I'll be okay. But who cares? That's not what we're here for. That's not the purpose. The purpose of me being here isn't for me to be okay. The purpose of me being here is to figure out how can I help as many people as possible, right? And I just stumbled. It was a complete accident, stumbling across this thing called entrepreneurship when I was in my teens, realizing that against my statistics, so as a boy of Caribbean heritage, born in Brent, I statistically have one of the lowest life chances in the country, right? Starting a business in my teens, giving me a skill set and a mindset, I believe has increased my life chances by like 20 or 30 times, right? Because the things that I've been able to achieve, I remember I was out at a dinner some years back, and a guy who I grew up with said to me, "You've done quite well considering you're from Harlesden." Oh. Now, he meant it in an endearing way, right? He meant it in a way to big me up. But I was heartbroken by that statement. I was thinking, well, that's all right for me, but what about the kid that's in Harlesden now, who's 11, 12, 13 years old? What about him? What about the girl in Harlesden? What about them? What about, you can take that socioeconomic profile of Harlesden and place it anywhere in the country. And I just thought, no, this is not right. This cannot be the narrative that, oh, you've done well considering you're from X area. That to me is that is a break in the system. That's a failing. That's a crack in the entire system, and someone needs to do something about it, right? So I'll put it on my back, right? And I will try and galvanize as many other leaders, entrepreneurs, professionals as I can, because obviously I can't do it on my own. But what I can do is try and have the conversation, spark some narratives, bring more awareness, create evidence from the kids that work with us. You know, the success of the kids is evidence of what I've been saying when we started. Kids can be entrepreneurs, they can change the world. That has happened with our kids. So now it's saying, with that evidence base, how do we amplify that? How do we scale that so that more kids around the country can benefit?
That's incredible. And another incredible thing about Ultra Education, that last year you delivered about 21 million in a social investment return. What I wanted to ask is, what have been some of the greatest success stories that have come out of Ultra Education?
These young man, believe he could be 16 or 17 now, Omari McQueen, who came on one of our programs really early. His mum, you know, we've had a great relationship with, and you know, he really caught the kind of vegan movement. But because, you know, he's a young black boy from South London, it was like amazing for people to see at such a young age him thinking about diet in a way that could have, you know, helped his mum, you know, become healthier. It was just an amazing story, and he was just such an amazing young man. But he's gone on, he's had his own TV show, cookbooks, you know, he was invited to Necker Island, he was there the week before me, and he's had an incredible journey, and he's inspired so many other young people to think bigger about what could be possible just off the back of a very, very small idea. There's another young man who you know, I started mentoring when he was 11 or 12 years old. He's in his late teens now. And he became very good at internet marketing, but in the way of, he started with Amazon. He then went and started doing drop shipping. He was really good at being able to identify a product and knowing what audience or knowing what influencer would help sell that product. I remember he showed me a product. They were called fish flops, right? They were like these flip flops that had a big fish at the front. I thought, what's the stupidest product I've ever seen in my life, right? And then there was this little Harry Potter music box. He could identify all of these products, and he just knew which ones were going to go viral. You know, sometimes products just go viral; they just go. He just had an eye. He just knew that product's going to go, that product's going to go, and he would know which audience, which demographic from a very young age, just like an art to it. And then he developed his own product. You know, as I kept talking to him, I said, you know, would you want to go with this? He was like, well, I'm a little bit tired of selling other people's products. I want to develop my own product. And so he developed this collagen product, his own collagen product. It's called Elevate. And, you know, I mean, they're doing very well. His turnover is in the millions. Wow. And he's, you know, like really talented when it comes to product development, influencer marketing, and sales.
That's brilliant. And I know that throughout your journey you've come into contact with lots of influential people, because you yourself are massive in business. Could you tell us a bit about some of the people that you've met and you've come across during your time as an entrepreneur?
So in my time as an entrepreneur, some of the people that I've come across who have really impacted my journey, I would describe them more as change makers.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing that entrepreneurship has really enabled me to do is to create change. It's not just about profit for me, because I remember when I was in my early 20s and I was working in investment banking, I remember at the end of the month when I'd paid all of my bills, I had a few £1,000s disposable income, right? And I looked at that and I thought, well, I'm no happier. Someone said, if you've got money in the bank, you'll make you happy. Well, I'm not happier, right? And I realized I couldn't just let the money sit there either. So, I got together with myself and a few other friends, and we invested the money into another company, and we basically flew out some of our friends to the States to get like exclusive clothing and jewelry and music and trainers that you couldn't get over here. Spent our money, we imported them, and then we would sell it, and we would rinse and repeat that. But I'm saying that to say that I was always trying to figure out, how could I do something with the capital? How could I change something, right? And in my early days, I thought, okay, the change was all about, making more money, right? But then I remember a friend of mine picked me up in his Ferrari, and he took me for a spin in it and all the rest of it. And I just thought, is that it?
Yeah.
That was so underwhelming, right? This is the kind of thing, the Rolex and the Ferrari is what so many young men aspire to. Maybe not today, maybe it's a bit different. Maybe they aspire to getting, a million views on YouTube, right? Hopefully. But that idea of the Ferrari and the Rolex, I just thought, your self-esteem isn't that high, right? I don't need the Ferrari and the Rolex to feel great, because my capability, my mindset, my vision for the future and for myself is what makes me feel good, not this thing. It's a nice toy, but I was in it for about half an hour and I was bored. I just thought, this can't be it. This cannot be the epitome of success. It just can't be. It just didn't make sense to me. I was really confused. So I spent my time kind of figuring out what it was. And that's why one of the things which drove me towards Ultra and developing the organization was because I realized I could make an impact. I realized I could shift the needle on challenges that young people were having across the board. And that meant more to me. Yes, the bills have got to be paid, wages have got to go through, the rent's got to, get covered. All of that stuff I get, which is the challenge of a social enterprise, right? The challenge of a social enterprise is that you've got to make profit and you've got to generate profit and make an impact. You've got to do both at the same time, right? But you're generating the profit so that you can make more impact, right? You're not generating the profit so that you can ride in a Bentley. And I've got nothing against people that want to ride in a Bentley. It's just that doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't, I would, if I had the money to buy a Ferrari, I'd probably buy one. But what I'd probably do first, well, actually I wouldn't. It's funny, I was having this conversation with my son. We were pulling up in a car park. He had to get some shin pad for football or whatever. And there was just amazing, I don't even know what the car was. It looked like the Batmobile, right? And I said to him, if the person who owned that was smart, what they would have done is they would have bought an asset. Could have been a property, some investments, could have been a business. And the money that's generated from that asset, they would have used to buy that car, right? So I said to him, if you want to buy that car, son, in the future, you need to have, an asset, something that will generate the revenue to buy the car. Otherwise you buy it and you've just wasted money, right? So that's probably what I would do. But the point is, the idea of taking a lump sum to put on a physical thing that you're now using to impress people, because that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're signaling your wealth. To me, means that that's the thing that underpins your self-esteem, or it's signaling what matters to you. Yeah. So I would rather, instead of having a picture next to a Ferrari, is have a picture next to 1,000 young people that we've supported. That means more to me, right? And I just think that we need more people who are generating profit for purpose than generating profit for material gain. Because the government, the government needs to sort all these things out. Trust me, the government is waiting for individuals to come up with solutions, because otherwise they would have done it already, right? The government isn't this like, I know it looks like they're just behind closed doors and all the rest of it. That's not really the case. People in government, they have leverage, they have capital, they're very smart, but they don't have all the answers. And I think they would admit that, which is why they try to engage communities, engage the commercial sector and say, what solutions have you guys got? Because we'll fund them, because if we had the solutions, we would have implemented them already, right? And I know it's not as easy as that in all cases. However, the onus is on us all, is the point I'm trying to make, right? And so I saw the deficit in young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and I wanted to create a strength-based and asset-based model that could say to them, look, yes, you weren't born in the right postcode. No, you don't have the perfect, family setup. You're not in a safe environment, but here's a way out. Here's a vehicle that you can use today to help you navigate your way through that. And I know that works because it's worked for me. And it's worked for hundreds of others, so it can work for you too.
Thank you. And aside from Ultra Education, you've also set up a digital marketplace called YoBuddy.
Yeah, so YoBuddy, youth business direct. And essentially, it came about through parents saying to me, Julian, have you got a platform that the kids can sell on? Mm-hmm. Right? Because we've got all these kids. You've got a fair once a year, which is great, but they need a platform that they can sell on, which is unique to them, because if they upload it onto Etsy, Amazon, eBay, it gets lost in all the noise. So we developed YoBuddy, which is essentially Amazon, but just for kids' businesses. And we've got about 250 kids selling on there, about 500 products. So kids are selling their products on there all the time. So it's a great way, to discover unique. If you're just a shopper, we've got stuff on there that isn't anywhere else, because our kids are uploading it exclusively there. But you also know that your money is going towards a young entrepreneur, just like in the way Etsy, your money's going to someone who's making the stuff. Someone's making that kind of stuff at home, right? It's the same kind of idea. But if you shop on YoBuddy, the money's going to a young entrepreneur.
Well, that's really powerful, because when I think of all of the bigger marketplaces, there's so much businesses and companies there. So a streamlined platform like that, I think it's the first of its kind, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely the first, yeah.
Thank you. And another thing is, your YouTube channel is really impressive.
Thank you.
You do case studies on Coca-Cola. I'll put a link to it in the interview. But you've done all of these case studies. The first case study I'd like to focus on is the 75-15-10 rule. Mm-hmm. Could you just explain that and how that's so important, even for young people in wealth management?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we leaned into kind of financial literacy, financial management and financial engineering for young people is because we were creating young people who could make money now. And then the parents were like, well, they're making all this money, but they're just spending it on Jordans every 5 minutes, right? What should we do? And I thought, it's not just about, wealth is more about how you manage the money you've got, not just how you make the money, because lots of people have made money and they've lost it because they don't know how to manage it. So I thought, okay, we need to figure this out. So one of the ideas, and we just need to try and keep this stuff simple for kids and young people, is 75-15-10 rule, which is that the money you make, 75% of it is probably going to go into essential living costs, right? Stuff that you've just got to spend to get by in that month. 15% of it should then go into long-term savings, like an investment type account or an investment type of vehicle, and 10% should then go into short-term savings, right? Now, the 15 and the 10 are important because wealth creation happens over a long period of time, yeah? So it's not how much money you put in, it's how long and how often. So, if you look at the compounding effect, there's lots of videos and content around what happens if you just compound £100 a month, £10 a week, right? The compound effect is huge because it snowballs over a long period of time, and, over 2-3 decades, it stacks up to being a lot of money, right? For putting in very small amounts, but it's the timeline across which you do that consistent savings approach, that consistent investment approach has a huge effect over a long time horizon. So that's really, really important, because I remember when I was in my teens, one of my mentors said that a wise man considers the result of his actions in 10 years from now. So what you do now, how is that going to affect your life in 10 years? How is it going to affect your life in 20 years? And that really stayed with me. And that's, again, part of the investment idea. Most people don't invest because they say that they don't have money, right? But people probably waste money on stuff. You know, Wingstop is quite expensive nowadays, right? If you're vaping or whatever it is you're doing, like that money, the same money you're wasting on stuff, on that, you know, Spotify subscription, just listen to the adverts. It's okay. The creators need to get paid, right? You could find £10 a week or £10 a month. Most people can, right? And you just do that on autopilot for decades. And I know, you know, young people think, decades, it's not even on their thought process, right? But this is part of the reframing that we need to kind of introduce to them. And then the 10% is everyone should, you know, in an ideal world, have between 3 and 12 months worth of living expenses just banked, you know, just in case, just because, right? You need to, whether negative things happen, you get sick, you can no longer work, something happens in your life, you need to stop, you've still got, you know, 3 to 6 months of money banked, you lose your job, whatever it might be. Or on a positive note, you might want to take a sabbatical. You might want to go and learn a new language, travel the world, do whatever it might be, right? But you've got that cushion there as well. And again, people will say, well, you know, I don't have enough money to save, right? What I would say to that is that that hour you spend watching TV or having that useless phone call for no reason, or you know, that extra hour of sleep that you might have because you ate too much the night before. You need to optimize if you find ways to optimize your life, you can find an extra hour a day, half an hour a day, just chip away at it. And over time, you'll be able to find ways that you can either cut down on your spending. You can still have the same quality of life, but you can have it in a more efficient way that can go into savings, short-term or short-term savings or long-term investments. And then you should kind of do an audit of your life with regards to your earning potential and capability, right? So either getting paid more in another working environment for the same type of job that you're doing, or pivoting what you're currently doing so that your trajectory towards a higher earning capability is possible, or finding a side hustle based on a passion that you have, or if you're really courageous, just screwing the 9 to 5 and having an uncapped earning potential by starting your own business, right? And even in that regard, I would say park the 3 to 12 months worth of living expenses if you're gonna, you know, do that entrepreneurial thing. When I went from investment banking to starting our digital agency in Shoreditch, we raised money for it. You know, I became so good at my job that I could do my job in half the time. Then the other half of the time I was, you know, fiddling away at my own business. And because as entrepreneurial as we were, we didn't want to leave. We all had good, well-paying jobs in the city, right? It seemed kind of, even for us at the time, ludicrous to leave though. So we just raised money. You know, we managed to raise some money, so we had some money in the bank to go off and, you know, do it. And I'm not saying that's easy, but we did it. It's doable, you know. I know a lot of the things that I've achieved, if you just look at it written down, it looks like it looks impressive even when I read it. But what people don't realize is for every accolade, I had 10 no's, 20 no's. For every success, for everything that we've won, we've lost 5 or 6 other things. It's not, I've almost just done the numbers. Mm-hmm. Yes, we've become better at what we've done over time, and I've become better as an individual over time, but I make mistakes all the time. I'm always learning. I don't regard myself as having something that other people don't have necessarily, right? There's an energy that I have, which I've identified. There's an energy that I have, which I know is able to get things done and get people to listen and so on. So I know I have that, right? But in terms of just skill set, I don't think I have skills that other people don't have. I have a work ethic that I know, Will Smith once said that he when he went into Hollywood, he knew he wasn't as good an actor as Denzel. He knew as an action star he wasn't better than Tom Cruise, for example. But he said, if he gets on the treadmill, he will die on the treadmill. No one's going to outwork him. That was his whole premise. I know I'm not that good of an actor. He just knew it because he wasn't, right? The Fresh Prince was not a good actor. He was a rapper, right? Who was playing himself. But just through pure work ethic, he became an amazing actor, right? Will Smith is just a good actor. He just is, right? He's obviously become better over time. And it's because of work ethic. It's not because he has an innate skill in acting. Denzel obviously has an innate skill for acting. Will Smith has worked hard at it. And that's what I've done. And I'm saying all of that to say to people that don't look at what I've done and think that was some, I was sprinkled with magic dust. I wasn't. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of no's, but I just knew that I wasn't going to stop. The no's were just information for me to use that to make things better. That no wasn't a failure. It was just new data for me to take into the next conversation I had, right? And all of that is because I'm looking at the thing that I'm doing, the core thing that I'm doing around teaching kids entrepreneurship as a lifelong pursuit. That's the reason why it doesn't matter to me if I get a no. I don't really care about it because I know I'm not going to stop. I know I'm just going to keep going. And for me, everyone needs to find that thing. I found it. I found that 10 years ago, and I'm just compelled to do it. So I think everyone should be on a journey to find the thing that compels them to do what they do against any sensibility, against what's practical, against what everyone else says. And for people who have found that thing, this will resonate with them. For people who have found it but not actioned it, then get a coach, listen to a podcast, go and speak to other entrepreneurs, people who have been on a similar journey with you. You need to get some inspiration and motivation to get going. That's not going to keep you there. You do need some systems and processes at some point, right, for it to become an actual machine. But it's absolutely worthwhile. And this is the idea, the mindset that we want to give to young people, that autonomy of doing what you love, making money from it based on some kind of creative pursuit, some problem that you're passionate about, that you want to solve, that is absolutely worth it.
Thank you. And I'd also like to touch on, you did a case study of Cenat, who's a leading YouTuber. What can budding YouTubers learn from his life and his approach to marketing?
Yeah, so Cenat did a few things which were firsts or near firsts. And in a world where YouTube has been around for a long time, streaming has been around for a long time, he still found ways to reinvent the wheel, right? He's obviously really entertaining as an individual, and part of that entertainment is that he obviously doesn't care what people think about him, right? He's obviously willing to look silly, do silly stuff, push the boundaries for entertainment value, and it works, right? Because and that to me says that he's not He's not too egotistical. He's not too proud. You know, he's willing to try new things. And I think that's the thing that I really rate about him. He's willing to try new things. He's willing to look stupid. It's the same thing with entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs go out and pitch an idea and they're at risk of looking stupid in front of a whole audience of people, right? But if you believe in it, you don't care. It's the same thing with Cenat. He was willing to try new things, to push the boundaries of what content creation could look like, to create an environment in that, you know, the famous studio that he kind of lives in and works out of and stuff. And I just think that his consistency, he went all in. He went all in. And I think in that particular niche, because it was so busy, it was so competitive, you know, it was clear that what he did was intentional. It was planned out. He didn't just say, right, I'm just going to start streaming. He thought about it and probably had a small team around him who kind of, you know, made it happen. So it was, even though it looks like he's just falling off his chair and knocking down his setup and it's all crazy, it's obvious that it's well thought out, well planned. There's a strategy behind it, and it's worked. And I guess what it says is, even though an industry could look mature, like YouTube streaming, there's always room. Part of the reason why I case studied him is just to demonstrate that no matter how far an industry has gone, there's always ways and means to innovate within that particular sector, and he did that really well.
Thank you. And one of the last questions I'd like to ask you is about your AI mentor, Abby.
Yep.
So please tell us about why you created the AI mentor and what opportunities it provides to Ultra Education.
Yeah, so back in 2017, I was playing with the chatbot technology, which was, you know, kind of coming of age then. And we had trained a chatbot to autonomously, just through a very basic chat mechanism, answer questions that our kids would ask us in a class environment, for example, right? So I wanted a way, because I've got a tech background. In tech, you're always thinking about scale, right? You're always thinking about, okay, I've got 10 users, how can I get to 100, 1,000, a million, 100 million, and all the rest of it? And so for us, our constraint was human resource, right? For us to deliver our classes to young people, we had to physically be there. One of our mentors had to physically be there, and we could work with, 10, 50, 100 young people at a time, whatever it might be. But that's a constraint. So when the chatbot technology first came along, I thought, let's try that. So we developed an MVP. This was obviously pre-ChatGPT. So we developed an MVP. It was called Ask Ultra, and we had trained this chatbot through an app through kind of multiple choice selections and basic chat to be able to guide a young person through a kind of decision tree about starting up a business, right? And that got some momentum. But because the technologies at that time were really expensive, we couldn't keep up with the costs of running that technology. So we had to kind of retire that. Not long after, ChatGPT now emerges, and everyone's now re-excited about AI. So we have kind of looked, because I have a tech background. Shout out to Piers Linney on this, because he kind of and his colleague Alok put me on to the idea of using now a voice agent, right, for some of the work we did. So off the back of some of that inspiration, I then went away and looked at what that tech stack could look like. And internally, we developed our own AI mentor called Abby. And we've trained it on the last kind of 10 years worth of our data. And yeah, she can, in the same way that we would teach a young person, young people can call her up on the phone, have a WhatsApp conversation with her, and she can now teach in the same way that we would.
That's brilliant. And the last question is, please tell us about any other projects, ventures you want to tell my audience about this year.
So we are running a national project called Bright Futures Young Investor Week. So we've got a project with a partner called Diverse Leaders Network. It's an Innovate UK funded project where we are training young people to be investors and to assess the pitches of entrepreneurs pitching for real money. And they'll be sitting next to real investors. So we've done this so far in London, Leeds, Liverpool, Birmingham, and we're going to be in Manchester and Bristol this year. So we're looking for partners, investors, and entrepreneurs from around the country to join us on that. The insight that young people provide entrepreneurs is, as you can imagine, very honest. Entrepreneurs often don't get the chance to pitch to teenagers, which is a great exercise for entrepreneurs because it means that they have to simplify their message, and for investors to be able to see who could be, the investors of tomorrow. It's a great opportunity. So there's that, and also just follow us, Ultra Education, on socials. We've got a whole bunch of events coming up this year, and we just like to welcome parents, educators, and young people to come down, check us out, so that we can help to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Julian, thank you so much for being such a great guest on my platform. This was a fantastic interview, and I really enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you for having me.